is up, Flick fans, and welcome back to my channel. As promised, I am back today talking about Deadwood, the movie. This just premiered last night on HBO. Deadwood is a show that came out in 2004 and abruptly, in its own way, got cut off in 2006. Only 3 seasons, but it is one of the most well-made Western television shows I have ever seen in my life. Now, I did not watch it when it first premiered. I got on board about 3 or 4 years ago, watched the first 2 seasons, recently watched the 3rd season, and really enjoyed the entire series. The only issue is there was never any payoff for the fans of the franchise. All of our characters just kind of got cut off at the end of season 3, but now, however many years later, we have a movie following up on all of the characters that we could follow up on. Certain actors, unfortunately, did not make it to the filming of this movie, but our core cast, for the most part, they return, and our core creators return to do this movie that came out on HBO last night. So we are going to talk about it. If you guys have never seen Deadwood, the show, I encourage you to go check out the show and follow up with this movie that will give you a nice payoff. And if you have seen the show and not the movie yet, no worries, no spoilers in this review. It's going to be very quick. I just want to encourage you guys to go check this out. So Deadwood, the show, is set in the late 1800s, revolving around the characters of Deadwood, South Dakota, a town of deep corruption and crime. This film follows up on that show and gives you an ending, I think the ending that fans never knew that they wanted, but the ending that fans anticipated just never got. This was a wonderful, wonderful movie. Now, in its own way, it does feel like a television movie. I can see why they didn't do what Downton Abbey did and release this in the theaters. One, because if you have never seen Deadwood, you are not, absolutely not, going to have the same response as people who have seen Deadwood, because those fans are going to get the ultimate payoff. And for me, someone who hasn't watched this show in a couple of years, but did go back, try to revisit as much as I can, and then to get that payoff with these characters was fantastic. You have our cast returning. Timothy Olyphant, who is just great in everything that he does, but he really shines in Deadwood. He always has. But the guy that I want to talk about returning after all of these years, Deadwood the movie, I can't believe I'm saying it, Ian McShane is awesome. We saw him earlier in the year in John Wick. We also saw him in Hellboy. Didn't like that movie as much, but he is just great. He is the character that we remembered all the way back in 2006, guys. 13 years later, he comes back and kills it. He's a bit more gruffled. He's a bit older, of course, you can tell, but he plays this character to a T, and he gives us that emotional resonance that we want from that character, and really all of the characters. I said this show is the ultimate payoff, and I mean it. Every character gets their due or gets a storyline resolved or kind of comes back on certain storylines that were maybe set up in earlier seasons but never touched back on. The only major issue I have as a Deadwood fan is, one, the fact that it does, like I said, feel like a television movie, right? It doesn't have that cinematic element necessarily, even though I think it's shot very well and it looks great, as does the series. But 2, it's too short. There's so much here cram-packed into 2 hours, and I understand why they had to do it, because this was their way to say, hey, you guys wanted this, you're getting this payoff. And I do believe they achieved that, but there's a lot happening. A lot of storylines, a lot of characters, only so much you can do, and they do pay off, like I said. And I was happy with most of the payoffs. Unlike, and I'm not trying to get Game of Thrones on you, but unlike the finale to Game of Thrones that gave us finality that a lot of fans weren't happy with, I think fans of Deadwood are going to be the opposite with this movie. They're going to love the resolutions. They're going to love where the characters are at the end of the show slash series now. Deadwood is officially over, and that final scene, without spoiling anything, was just chilling and sad and emotional, and it had to do with one of my favorite characters. So I loved everything that this film gave us. Bullock is great. Ellsworth is great. Swearingen is, as we expected him to be, really good, and it's so suiting that the beginning of this movie starts off with a baby being born. It's kind of like throwing you back into this world, but it's new beginnings for a lot of these characters. There are character arcs that you don't anticipate to go in one direction, but they do, and then they kind of pick up on romances that were hit upon and set up and never followed through with, and you can feel the chemistry and the connection between certain characters in certain scenes of this film, and I love that they just brought all of those things back. They did not forget about story arcs set up in Season 1 and Season 2, and especially Season 3, and they brought them all back, and they were all, for the most part, perfect. The end of this movie deals with aging and the passing of time and how grief and corruption can affect those characters and how fans of the series were left off with no resolution. Therefore, we were upset, and this movie starts showing parallel to what the fans have felt for all of these years. It was just brilliantly executed. It felt like a Western. Listen, today, Westerns aren't near as good as they used to be. Yes, we have movies like Django Unchained, which is great, Bone Tomahawk, and even No Country for Old Men, which is kind of like a modern Western, and Hell or High Water, but how often is it that we get a Western that is actually a Western with writing this good, with characters this fleshed out? And yes, we did have the help of 3 seasons prior, but it's kind of like Avengers Endgame. Without all of those other movies building up to it, we wouldn't love this movie as much as we love this movie, but it's the same thing here. Without all of those seasons building up to Deadwood, if you are not a fan going in and watching this, yeah, you may be a bit confused. You may not care near as much as I do, but it's not necessarily for those people. I think they will enjoy it because it is great writing, great characters, and a nice story on its own merits. I think this Western could stand up to a lot of Westerns in that time period made today, even if it is a movie on HBO. But when you include everything that we know and love from the show, that's when this movie really takes off, and that's when it's so satisfying to fans, guys. I had a great time with this. It's not every day I see a Western that is this impactful, and Deadwood the movie gets a solid 82% from me. I enjoyed this thoroughly as a fan of this series. This is a great Western, a great payoff for fans, and I want to see what you guys think. Get in the comments down below. Did you like Deadwood? Were you satisfied with this movie? Have you never seen Deadwood? Are you looking forward to going back and revisiting those first 3 seasons so then you can get the payoff? You're not doing it all for nothing. No, there is a legitimate reason to get invested into the story now, and that is so exciting for me. Thank you guys once again for watching this video. More things to come this weekend, more reviews. Be on the lookout for my best and worst of May, and I'll see you guys later.